Welcome, everyone, to the Mentium Matters podcast, where we talk about leadership, life, and the transformative power of mentoring. I'm Megan Cummings Krueger, and today we're going to be talking with Andrya Pearson. Andrya was a panelist for one of our business education webinars earlier this year when we discussed the topic of beyond motivation, intentions, goals, and a clear path for success. And it was a great conversation on a pressing topic for so many of us today. So I'm really looking forward to having more time to focus on that conversation and expand upon it. Now, before we get started, let me just share a little bit of background on Andrya with you. Andrya is a learning and talent development professional with over 20 years of experience leading organizations that include Allstate Insurance, Cardinal Health, CVS Health, and most recently, Aetna Health, where she led initiatives focused on unlocking human potential and delivering measurable outcomes. And I'm just going to add here, very much like our focus here at Mentium. So it follows that from the beginning of her career, mentorship and coaching has been the cornerstones of her professional ethos. Over this past decade, she's partnered with Mentium, mentoring 5 mentees, and at the same time, she has mentored in many other arenas, including the mentoring that she provides as a proprietor of Mentoring Wise, where she assists her clients in navigating the corporate landscape and, again, maximizing their potential. Now, I also want to highlight that Andrya has proactively created an ERG mentor program for Allstate and currently serves on the board of the Boys and Girls Club of Lake County, Illinois, where she's contributing to the development of future leaders in her community. So simply put, she has always had that mentoring mentality, and we are all the better for it. Andrya received her Bachelor of Arts in Secondary Education from Bowling Green State University and a Master of Science in Corporate Training and Development from Loyola University, Chicago. She is the proud mother of 2 adult daughters and shared that she continues to hone her culinary talents, reporting that her red velvet cake is a signature dish. Welcome. And someday I'm going to have to try that.
Definitely. A lot of calories, but not calorie free.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always say, is it worth the calories?
Oh, it's always worth it, but
absolutely. So as I mentioned in your introduction, you were one of our panelists for that webinar, the Beyond Motivation, Intentions, Goals, and a Clear Path for Success. And during that discussion, you really pulled from both your natural strengths as well as your rich experience, and you shared a number of insights. So I'd like to start out by continuing that conversation for this audience. And I'd like you to share, what have you found to be important when we're setting goals?
Goals are, to me, foundational. So as a leader in learning and talent development and leader just in an organization, every organization has a mission, and your work needs to align to that mission. So when you're thinking about what do I do on a day-to-day basis, that's where goal setting comes in. As you're setting the goals, it's an opportunity for you as an individual contributor or manager and your senior leadership team to align with what are we here to do, what is the end game. So when you set your goals, you can clearly identify, I have 6 priorities, and in aligning with those priorities, you can rank what is an A, a B, or a C. So if time gets short, what is a must get done to a should get done to, well, maybe we can push it off. So that's where I feel goal setting is crucial to everyone's career.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, with all the work I do and speaking with mentees, this really gets at what is facing everyone these days with what is important versus urgent.
Exactly.
And it sounds like, we all know this, right? But it really is making the time to be doing that. So, what have you found when you've been mentoring others that has helped them protect that time, make sure they are taking that step back?
Well, I think if you, again, have your goals set and I would say if everything's important, then nothing's important, because once you say every task is important, you can't really prioritize. So you have to prioritize, but your priority list needs to match the company's priority list and your leadership's priority list. So when you are overwhelmed and your leaders are saying, I need you to add one more thing. I need you to do one more thing. You can say, okay, out of my priorities, here's my A's. These are the things that need to get done. How would you want me to reorganize, recategorize these items so that what is now the new priority is ensured to get done and then what comes next? So it's really a partnership between you and your senior leadership to say, time is finite. So here's what I can do, and how do you want me to reprioritize and get everything done that truly needs to be done?
That's such an effective way to approach that, and really also kind of highlights how important it is that communication with your leadership, right?
Definitely, because your leader, unless you say, I'm at capacity, they may not know. And, you might think, okay, they know because they've given me 6 things, but they may have handed out 24 items and they're not calculating how much you have on your plate. So when you really reset that stage and say, help me prioritize, it gives them insight to what you're working on, what you're doing, and they will help you identify what your number one priority is.
I love that. And the other piece, I think, is that it naturally deals with, so often when we're kind of struggling, we're in our own world. And it's easy also for us to lose sight of the fact that, our manager, our leadership may be in the very same situation. And so they may have completely lost track of all that is on our plate. So I just love how that simple communication can really effectively deal with that.
I know with my direct reports, it's always beneficial when they come to me with that because, again, like you said, I have 12 plates in the air and I don't know how many you have in the air, but if you say, okay, here are the 5 things you've given me in the last day, help me prioritize, I can sit down, rethink, because you might be the go-to person, but maybe someone else on the team has capabilities, has skill set to jump in and help.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I'm thinking, and I know we're going to talk about this a little later on, but it also, there's so much that comes from that simple but very effective way of responding to getting yet another task when you're already at capacity. And that is, it's also such an effective way to make sure your manager is staying in touch with all that you are doing, that authentic self-promotion piece. So I love that.
I agree.
I thank you so much. All right. So building on this goal setting, what do you see when you're applying it to mapping out your career path? So what skills do you see as being essential to advancing your career?
Well, I would look at career mapping or building your career. Every role that I've been in, I can't think of a role that I've been in where I've had a defined career path. It's always been, where you go where you want to and you kind of map your own career. But thinking about that, you need to look at, where am I now? What do I like about my job? And what do I want to continue doing? So as you look at your accountabilities, are there components of your job you don't like and components of your job you do like? And is there a job 1 step or 2 steps ahead of you that would give you more of what you really are leaning into? And once you do that, then you start identifying, how do I get from A, where I am now, to C, D, or E? So that's really career mapping. And I find when you are, again, goal setting and creating your IDPs or your individual development plans, having a short-term, mid-term, and long-term goal helps get you to where you're going. And sharing that plan with your leadership lets them know where you want to go. Because sometimes it's a elevation and you move from A to B to C, or sometimes it's a lateral and you may have to take a lateral move and go across to get cross-functional skill sets to help you get to where you are. So again, it's really about communicating, but also doing some planning and thinking about, in 5 years, where do I want to be? In 10 years, what is my ultimate goal?
And, a part of this, and I'm hearkening back again to all the conversations I've had with mentees. And again, because it's really kind of turbulent times, pausing is we have to remind ourselves, sometimes we have to remind ourselves to just do that deep breath in the moment. But you have always had, and maybe it goes with a mentoring mentality, but you have always had an ability to not have the blinders on. I hear from so many mentees that, if I do hard work, I'm going to get tapped. for this opportunity. And I'm sure you've had that with a variety of people you've mentored. What do you find most helpful to them, to someone listening in the audience, that they share that assumption common with so many? They've kept their head down, they're working hard, and now they're like, I need to take off the blinders. So obviously, of course, some goal setting. What have you found helpful?
So the way I came to that realization is when I joined Allstate, which you mentioned before. That was one, and went into our corporate headquarters. That was kind of the guidance that we were given, was that, everyone that's in this building is doing amazing because they've made it to corporate headquarters. So for you to advance, you need to not only be great at doing your job, you also need to be advocating for yourself and developing executive presence and really showing up. So when I meet with my mentees, I tell them, you've been tapped, especially a mentee, you've been tapped as a high potential individual. But how are we going to elevate your executive presence? How are we going to elevate your exposure? How are we going to, get you in front of the right people? Because everyone sitting in that room may be capable of doing what you're aspiring to do. But how do you identify for yourself and for leadership that I'm the correct person and I'm the next person up for that opportunity?
Oh, absolutely. And this is probably, it is in the top 3 of areas of focus for our mentees. Every mentee has their own individual goals, but executive presence, authentic self-promotion, those things right now are in the top 3 for everyone for a variety of reasons. So what have been your takeaways around developing this skill, executive presence? It means different things to different people, but in general, that ability to present yourself with that confidence. I think you and I talked about that TED Talk, Amy Cuddy's, where you go in and assume the Wonder Woman pose for 2 minutes, feel that that energy before the meeting. But what have you found helpful for yourself, or what you found maybe surprisingly to you has been really helpful with others you've been mentoring?
So executive presence to me is really, what is your brand? And I use that word now because a lot of social media influencers, they have a brand, and you have to think of yourself as your brand. And what brand do people see or think about when you enter the room? So what do you want to be known by? Or what is your professional image that you want to carry through? So interestingly enough, I just read an interesting book called Be the Unicorn, and it's talking about the 12 attributes of how you stand out. So being a unicorn, you don't have to be great at all of them, but the one thing you're going to really stand out for, and it might be being the one with the quick response, being agile, being the problem solver, being curious. So what are you going to be known for, and how do you really leverage that? So when you think about what am I good at? Am I a quick starter? Can I go in and really figure it out and come up with a solution? So, be the unicorn and really think about that. And so interestingly enough, just in the last couple of weeks, some of the individuals I'm mentoring came to me and said, in interviews, they're saying, how are you the unicorn?
Really?
I know. I didn't know that. I just read the book because somebody suggested it to me. So I've been suggesting the book to a lot of people, and I'm just like, it's funny. So, everybody's reading this book, but it's really interesting. So when you look at executive presence, I would say it's a little more difficult now that we're virtual than when we were in person, because in person, and how I really adapted to it, is you go into a meeting and you look at not your leader, but a couple of levels above. How are they showing up at the meeting? Are they getting there on time? When they speak up, are people listening, or are people not paying attention? Because, different leaders have different attributes and they are seen for different things. And you identify who you want to really follow, or who really leans into a style that you feel comfortable with. And you start looking at them and saying, okay, what can I glean from them? What can I learn from them? How do they command attention in a meeting? How do they get their messaging across? You can still do it in a virtual environment. It's a little more difficult because, you're not seeing always the body language or their aura of their presence when they come into a room, which, in person, you notice that, like when certain people enter the room, the dynamic of the room changes. So when you're trying to develop that, I would say look at individuals that you are considering your role models and what can you learn from them. Also, developing executive presence is really about doing your due diligence. Every time I've gone into a situation where I'm the new person or I'm new on a team or I don't know, I go in overly prepared. I go in and I get the agenda or I figure out what the topic is and I read and now my favorite saying is Google is your friend. So Google everything, read articles, documents, newspapers, whatever. Try to get as much information. That doesn't mean you have to go in and just spill everything that you know. But if somebody asks you, you can say, well, I'm new in this environment, but in my previous role, I saw A, B, C, D. Or in an article I read, here's the latest insight. So have something of value to add.
Andrya, what a wealth of wisdom you just unpacked there. There's so much to comment on. What I will say is, first off, the do your diligence, so important. Even things like knowing the language that is valued by that other organization. There's just so many ways. And a lot of times we do forget the watching others. It's very easy for us, and we're talking a moment about, when humans are under a lot of stress, which we all are, the first hit is to our confidence. And so oftentimes we're a little too self-concerned about how we're presenting, how we're behaving, and remembering to take that perspective, shift it over and say, what are they doing? What do I like about their behavior? I think is such an important reminder. But the other thing I just love that you shared, first off, the unicorn, now people are going to be prepared when they get that question. But also I love the permission that comes from that, right? Because it reminds me of the Strengths Finder where we all have been told we have to be well-rounded. And I always love that the Strengths Finder is like, no, you want to be spiky. What are those strengths that also motivate you, right? I love that. Any other, just a quick aside, anything else as you've been reading through the Unicorn book that kind of stuck with you?
It's interesting that they broke it down, the way they broke it down into the 12 attributes and really just honing in on the one that you, again, like you said, Strengths Finders. Because sometimes you say, oh, these are my weaknesses, so I'm going to focus on my weaknesses. And Strengths Finders tell us, no, focus on what you're strong at. So you can maybe bring your weakness from weakness up to midpoint. But if you take a strength and really focus in on that, you're going to excel. You're going to be a superstar in that area. And that's really in this corporate environment, that's what you want. You don't need to be the jack of everything. You need to be the superstar in one defined thing and have exposure so that when people are looking for that NBA player or NFL player or that superstar, that star athlete, they know to go to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it brings with it when you're thinking about this, it's bringing that focus and that intentionality. The whole personal brand has been a very powerful concept that we've been hearing a lot about in the corporate world the last 10 years or so. And it is true that if you're not being intentional about what's being said about you, someone else is in charge of your brand. Exactly. If you're not doing it, right?
Exactly. And I think social media has really just highlighted that. So if you look at TikTok, you look at Instagram, you look at even YouTube, you follow certain people because you like their brand. They get your attention because you're drawn into whatever that brand is, right? There's 100 people saying the same message out there. Why are you following the individual that you're following? Because they are branding themselves. They have a certain look and feel. They have a certain way of disseminating messages to you. It's so funny because, people are all kind of fearful of social media, and I love it because I just learned so much. I really do. I learned so much about it. And when you're looking at working with individuals from generation, whatever the next generation is, all the way back to, you still have boomers in the working economy. So how do we touch them all? And social media really has captured a large portion of every generation. So there's a lot to gain from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I've always found this to be true. Great mentors, you're all continuous learners. You're all curious, which of course is what I love because I'm a nerd. But I think sometimes it's lost because a lot of times we will put a mentor on a pedestal because there is a lot of wisdom that they can impart to us, and especially in areas that we need. But so often the mentees will forget, hey, mentors learn, and I hear it all the time. They feel they learn almost as much from their mentees because they, as you say, if you can learn from social media, you can learn.
Yep. 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 And I'm a continuous learner, so I'm in the L&D space. So I try to learn something new every single year. I put myself in the role of being a new learner, whether it's a new hobby, a new whatever. I take classes, I go to seminars, and I always want to do it because I don't want to forget what it's like to be new and to be scared and to be not the expert in the room.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And that's, again, intentionality.
Yeah.
All right. Then on the flip side of, that brand, that executive presence is the reality, which all of us are feeling at some point internally. If we're honest with ourselves, it's become a very popular term, the imposter syndrome. And as I said, when we are in turbulent times, it is just the human makeup that the first thing impacted is our confidence. So I would love to just hear your perspective around the imposter syndrome, either from you personally or for what you've seen from your mentees, your mentors.
I think the first thing is that we need to acknowledge that it's real, and it impacts every single person. Every time you go into a space or a room where you're new and you're supposed to be leading someone or you're supposed to be the expert, you're like, okay, they're going to figure out that I'm not really as put together as I am. So I always tell people to acknowledge that it's real. So there's nothing weird because you feel that way. Every single person feels that way. But again, when you have that feeling, lean into it. Do your due diligence. Go ahead and study. If you're going into a meeting, get the agenda topics ahead of time. Do as much research as you can. So you walk in and you're like, I don't know this, everyone at the table, the boardroom. I don't know, everything about what has happened in the past, but I know a little bit. So if I'm asked a question, I can kind of move forward. You also need to really challenge the negative feelings. Think about, I'm good enough. I'm here. You belong there. You have value. So don't diminish yourself to just sit there and say, okay, I'm going to cower in because I'm an imposter. I don't feel like I belong here. You belong there. You have value. You're adding value to every room and position that you're sitting in. So I would say you may not say anything in the meeting. You may ask a clarifying question. You may give a thought. So, you're like, oh, I only asked the question. That's valuable. You may have sparked something that someone else hadn't thought of. So again, take those negative feelings, challenge them and say, okay, I know that I don't know everything, but I'm okay. I'm good enough. I belong here and I'm bringing value. And when you do that, that will boost your confidence. And then, I would say celebrate your wins. If you ask a question, people go, oh, that's a good question. Celebrate that. Acknowledge that, I did add value. I did bring something. And then lastly, find role models or advocates or somebody that you can really partner with. If you're in a meeting, like I joined the Boys and Girls Club and I didn't know anybody. So I started networking and talking to people and finding out who was in the same line of business that I was in, or, some connecting factor, because then you can ask questions. You can say, you may not ask the question in front of the entire board, but you might ask that person, okay, so in the past, did you do this or have you tried that? So having an advocate is always beneficial. It's like, finding that friend on the playground.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. This is going to be a very odd non sequitur, but when you were saying that, it reminded me, my husband loves history. He's always reading historical books. And one of Ben Franklin's truthisms was, if you have an enemy, ask to borrow a book, borrow something. That makes them like you more. You know what I mean? So when you talk about those finding connections, et cetera, there's always been such a power there. And I also love how you reframe, again, all of us know the self-talk, we're not always good, especially when we're under stress. And I think it is so powerful to figure out, as you were giving those examples of what you want to say to yourself. Because I remember when my girls were young, And a friend taught me this, and I would catch myself saying, I am such a bad mom. And they had said, no, you're having maybe a bad mom day. You're not a bad mom. So the power of that reframe, right? I think what I most, as I was listening to you, and thank you for all these tangibles, I just am very excited because, again, I think right now that is most helpful to so many of us. But in my background in psychology, there's a truism where if your feeling and your behavior don't match, one of them has to change. So, like, I love that you were saying, okay, so I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't be feeling like such an imposter. Well, you are, and apparently you can't talk yourself out of it. Then you change your behavior. You do your research, as you were saying. Or if that feeling isn't there. But I just love how that kind of gives you permission to do whatever it is you need in the moment.
And I feel like when you talked about the self-talk, one thing that I've seen a couple of public speakers do before they go out and whether address a classroom or a lecture hall or an auditorium of people, they listen to positive messaging. They'll put on a podcast, they'll put on a video, they'll put on something that really gets them excited and geared up to be in the right mindset. So it takes you out of that mindset of, I can't do this. And you're listening to Tony Robbins and he's like, you can do this. And he's jumping up and down on the trampoline. And you're like, okay, so after you do that, you listen to him for 25 minutes, then you go out. You're already, he's been your cheerleader. He's gotten you, geared up to go and do what you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, that's such a great example. And, it's funny because in the past when I have been, maybe working with groups or individuals, and I would talk about that message, you could see a few of them thinking, oh, it's kind of a little woo woo, but the reality is, think about it when there's a Olympic skier at the top of the mountain. What are they doing? They're doing visualization. They're doing coaching for themselves. And I think however it is easiest for us to accept it, it is such a reality about what we say to ourselves, but also, and I love an outside cheerleader. What a great idea.
Like you said, the Olympics, they're listening to motivational songs and they're gearing themselves up. They're getting ready for that ultimate challenge, run, race, whatever it is. They're pumping themselves up that they got this.
Yeah.
So that's a really good routine to get into if you're doing something where you're feeling uncertain, is to have a routine where this is my song, this is my go-to song, it might be the Rocky theme, whatever. And it gets me going and it gets me fired up and I think I can tackle the world. Listen to it before you go out.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's a great idea. I'm taking this one. I'm making notes for myself. Another area I just wanted to touch base with you with, because as you said, there is an additional hurdle for all of us now that we're very much in a virtual world. Maybe it's hybrid. For most of us, it's at least partial virtual. Again, mentoring is about connecting with learning. It's connecting with others. So as we are navigating more uncharted waters with the more virtual world, networking is another way that we've always connected, and it used to be we could stop by the desk, what have you. What are your insights about, what are the benefits of networking, but also what have you found that has been kind of best practices?
The benefits are, too many to name for networking because you don't want to be on an island by yourself. So, especially going into a new job or a new company, you don't know everybody. So once you've been there for 10 years, 15 years, you know everybody. And you're like, okay, you need this, go to Bob. You need this, go to Sally. You need to build that network so that you can be effective in your job and you can be effective if you're leading people and getting your people the resources that they need. So what we've done in this virtual environment is instead of saying, oh, let's meet for coffee at, the local corner, it's like, let me set up 15 minutes in a virtual call. And it's a meet and greet. And just kind of introducing yourself. It's kind of nice to be on camera and to say, hi, I'm new. Here's my background. Tell me about your climb in the organization. Tell me about your time in this department. So really, and it's a way, again, to find your people because everybody you network with may not be your people, but you're going to find some people. You're going to find some people you have things in common with, some people that kind of get your humor, some people that you can share stories with, some people that are historians of whatever it is, the company, the board, whatever, that'll give you all the historical background because that's what they do. They collect the facts and they want want to share it with you. So I would say it's always important to network and, do it virtually. What I did tell one of my mentees, the last mentee I worked with, she was going to conferences. And I said to her, take your business cards, give it to people, that you interact with. But when you get back, go on LinkedIn and connect with them and even take pictures at the seminar or the summit that you're at and post some pictures and connect people. So there are a variety of ways of doing it. I know people get uncomfortable. I get uncomfortable doing it. Sometimes I go, I don't want to network. I just want to sit here and be invisible. But I do. But I have a game that I play with myself. If I'm somewhere and I know no one, I give myself permission to meet 5 people, talk to 5 people. Once I've done that, if I still don't want to interact, I'm off the hook. I've done my job. But it's like, you must talk to 5 individuals, connect with them. And then if you still don't need to make a connection or whatever, you can go sit in the corner and just veg. But you have to meet 5.
Well, and I love that because, when you set that kind of a habit, it makes sure that you push out of your comfort zone. Yeah. But once you've done it, then you have permission. Okay, I tried, or whatever the situation is.
Exactly. And a lot of times in that time, you will, especially if you're at a conference or whatever, you'll find people that you then are hanging out with throughout the conference. You'll find people that you are going to lunch with, or you're meeting after the seminar and you're saying, let's go get a drink or whatever. But if you don't force yourself, and again, if you say, I met one person, it's like, okay, that's not good enough. For me, my number is 5. You might want to do 7, or you might say 3, but 5 to me was a nice number that if I've done 5 and I've interviewed and introduced myself to 5 people, then I can go and just be a wallflower.
Well, and the other thing I just want to highlight, and I know you and I, of course, are on the same page, but there is a lot of baggage with the term networking, glad handing, what can I get from this person? And so I think it's always helpful to also reframe and really see it as, what can I also do? I mean, you have that mentoring mentality, you approach everything that way. But I think sometimes that can also give people permission if they don't think they're coming at someone trying to get something. But hey, what can I do for this person? It feels like that's a little more kind of power for themselves.
Yeah, and I see networking as just an introduction. So you're not trying to get something from them. They may not be trying to get anything from you. It's just a conversation. But when you then need to go back to your network at a later time, or I've met people at conferences that have business tools or business software that I didn't know anything about that was interesting. So then I'm like, okay, well, if I'm interested in that and I have their business card or I've connected on LinkedIn, I can then follow up to say, it was great meeting you. I'd love to have an intro meeting and bring my leadership team to look at this software. So you can look at it that way, but that was not the goal of me doing the networking. It was just to learn more about you as an individual and what's in your world.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, 2 final questions. And the first is kind of the classic, and we've covered a lot of ground, but I like asking it because I like to make sure, this is your time to kind of share with everyone, do that collective mentoring. So the first is the classic, what do you know now in your career that you would have loved to have known when you were starting your career?
Oh gosh, that's such a big one. And
I know.
So much. I know so much now that I didn't know. And I will say this, and when I say I wanted to be a wallflower, I really did. And when I first started working, I didn't really reach out and talk to people. So there was I guess, perception that either I didn't know what I was doing or that I was standoffish. And it wasn't that. I was just shy and didn't know anybody. So the whole branding and how to market yourself and how to make sure people know what your brand is, had I known that years ago, I would have been much more intentional about it, because I was one of those people that went into corporate America thinking you sit, you do your job, and you will be rewarded. They will tap you on the shoulder and say, okay, you're up, you're going to be promoted. That's not how it works. And I think that's the main reason I went into mentoring, because once I got into corporate America and I understood that, I saw people coming right out of college and being a part of an ERG, an employee resource group, we were like, we have to let them know. We know that, you sitting in school and you getting great grades and that was always rewarded. It doesn't work like that here. So my passion was really to capture people early in their career so that they would not spend the years and be frustrated, because that's really what it is. You're like, I sat there, I did my job, I did my 40 hours, I even did overtime, or I did this, and somebody else got promoted over me.
Yeah.
Because they were more visible.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that you didn't do the same thing, but you didn't have the visibility. You didn't have the advocates. You didn't have people promoting you. So knowing that really makes the difference, and it stops people, in my mind, from getting so frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I would say also knowing you and knowing our mentors, the other piece that I think is such a gift when we have a mentor is, when we think about the imposter syndrome and we think we blew it, and then you can go to your mentor and they will hold that mirror up and show you and reframe it and say, hey, this was great. That gift is it has such an impact, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And I still have a mentor.
Yeah.
I have a mentor now, and I'm looking at a business decision. And what I've also learned is don't react immediately. Take a minute, take a beat, and say, okay, this has made me mad, or this is not fair. But instead of reacting and sending an email, it's like, okay, let me get a hold of my mentor who will then coach me in how to handle it in a more appropriate manner.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, having that avenue where somebody is helping you and guiding you and supporting you is huge.
It's huge. And I think also it is the power of the pause, right? In so many different ways, and it's more challenging than it's ever been, but it has therefore more power than it ever has, as you say, because I'm also I'm a quick responder and a quick thinker, and had to really focus on pause, take that step back. Okay. Last question for you. Do you have a favorite quote, favorite motto? For me, I usually rotate them in for a year or two. So is there anything right now that you find yourself going to a lot?
Let me think. I rotate them on a yearly basis. I come up with one and then I go to another one. It's a Chinese, and I can't think of exactly how it is phrased, but it's about the things that you learn, no one can take it away from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like money can be taken away from you, power can be taken away from you, but the things that you acquire, that you learn, are your treasures forever.
Wonderful. That counts. We may not have the exact wording, but that's such an important message. And it's so true to you, right? With that love of learning.
Yes.
Andrya, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and your insights. The challenges, creating goals, staying intentional, maintaining motivation inside and out. These are all issues that we can all relate to. And again, more keenly in these interesting times. But it's so helpful to hear from successful leaders like you about what you've experienced and having the benefit of those tangible suggestions, things to focus on, sentences to try. One of my favorite right now that has helped me a lot, even in this last year, has been action absorbs anxiety. And you have given us a lot of actions to try. I thank you so much. And I also want to thank all of our listeners for joining this Mentium Matters podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with friends and colleagues. And if you're interested in additional resources, you can find our show notes on the Mentium website. And we look forward to having you join us for our next inspiring conversation.